Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. This is a UK-US social media politics update. I'm going to give you an update on the ongoing scandal concerning grooming gangs in the UK. Elon Musk is the richest man in the world with a huge megaphone. UK political scene, what's going on with social media outside of Twitter, stretching into Meta and other places like TikTok, and the response possibly from the EU and some countries in response to the interference in the political realm that Elon Musk is perpetuating. And I'm going to be upfront with you now. This is going to be a long video. If you're not up for listening to what I'm going to talk about, don't watch the video. Don't put in the comments, oh, doing this again, it's too long, blah, 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 blah. You know how long it is. You can see how many minutes is on the video. Don't watch it if you don't want to, but if you do want to find out more about what's going on and the disinformation concerned with the accusations, then please check out what I'm going to say. We're going to start with Elon Musk hosting German far-right leader this week. I think it's even tomorrow, actually, Alice Weidel, in a live stream on X, on Twitter, and that's sparking fury from EU leaders and lawmakers who on Monday urged Brussels to deploy its full legal might to rein in the billionaire tech magnate. And we're going to return to that at the end of the video. In response, the European Commission said the SpaceX founder could indeed land in legal hot water under the terms of the EU's new digital rulebook. So that's where we're going to start off. We're going to look at later the actions of some other tech magnates and see what this man Elon Musk is saying. And actually, he's saying quite a lot at the moment. I mean, he's spent a couple of days posting about, a couple of days, 3, 4, 5 days now, posting about the UK, basically attacking the UK. In, I don't know, 90% of what he's saying at the moment is an assault on the UK political scene. Why? I don't know, maybe because we've got a centre-left government and he sees that as his next, I don't know, pet project. He's interviewing Alice Weidel from the AfD. He's singing the praises of that sort of far-right political party in Germany. He's previously been reposting Geert Wilders of the PVV in the Netherlands and any number of far-right entities throughout the political world. He has been advocating for Reform UK to be divisive in the UK. In fact, saying that Nigel Farage wasn't fit to run the party because he wasn't far right enough. He was saying he wasn't going along with Elon Musk's advocacy for Tommy Robinson. And we're going to return to that later. I mean, we've even said, we've seen Elon Musk in the last couple of days slagging off British police for not having actual guns, something we're quite proud of in the UK. Our police don't particularly need guns. When they do need them, there are armed units that can respond, but we don't carry guns because we don't have a gun culture. And that's cool with me. It's great. Every time I go out in the streets, I don't see guns. And we take for granted how safe our streets are and our neighbourhoods are in relation to gun crime. And before you say, oh, but you got knives. Yeah, I'd much rather have a person going on a rampage with a knife than with an automatic rifle. Okay, so that's the country I live in. And to have Elon Musk having a go at our police for not having guns, I think he can just take a long walk off a short pier. So Musk is pursuing, says Anders Eslund, an extraordinary blitzkrieg against liberal democracy. The Democrats of the world need to stand up against him and swiftly elaborate a strategy on how to defeat this plutocrat and racist threat to democracy, says Eslund, as in response to the interview of Alice Weidel on his platform, platforming, one side of a very divisive debate. Let's dip into the rest of his politics. They've done a fascinating, this whole hour was well worth a watch. It gives you a good flavour of all sorts of things concerning this populist movement in Europe and in America. There's a great section on Kekal, the Austrian leader possibly soon to be chancellor, leader of the FPO party, that is exactly the sort of person that Musk appears to want to be in charge of a country like Austria. And you're starting to think, Austria, AfD in Germany, are we seeing hallmarks of the 1930s in Europe now? And this is kind of what they're talking about. Anyway, the video is called Musk's Supervillain Era Begins. And here's a little section on the Conservative Rory Stewart talking about his view of who Musk is and what he's all about. I better put that on normal speed for you.
Elon Musk is obsessed with the fact that the birth rates in places like the United States and Europe are declining. And he doesn't think that the solution to that is to bring in migrants from places like Latin America to fill the declining birth rates. And some of the language around this and some of the concepts around this are not a million miles away from the Great Replacement theory, which again is an obsession with the idea that the birth rates in Europe and the US are plummeting and we're all being replaced by immigrants. And he certainly has some of that going on in his head, even if he doesn't subscribe to the whole theory. It was actually originally developed by a far-right French intellectual thinker who almost nobody's heard about, and has then been taken up by many others. So there is now in Germany this identitarian movement, which again is on the edge of what Musk is doing, where essentially at the heart of it is a very, very profound racist view, which they dress up in a word they call ethnopluralism. And ethnopluralism basically says people should live in their own countries where they're naturally from.
Like South Africa.
Like South Africa. And actually, it's quite interesting. You've just put your finger on something quite interesting there. I mean, Musk comes from South Africa, grew up in an apartheid state. The other person who's been a big proponent of this stuff is Michel Houellebecq, who again grew up in French Algeria, which was a semi-apartheid state. And all these people also have these words. You'll see them when you go on Twitter because a lot of their followers are now echoing it. So they talk a lot about civil war, how Britain is collapsing into civil war, France is collapsing into civil war, America's collapsing into civil war.
We've seen that a lot from people like Tim Pool, but a lot of those on the right in America is talking about how, everywhere is involved in civil war, particularly America.
They've got this phrase remigration, which is very, very popular with Tommy Robinson, but is also used by the AfD in Germany and is used by Kikel on the far right in Austria, which is the idea that you're going to send people back to the countries that they came from. They're obsessed with rape, so they have this idea that Muslims are inherently rapists, and they connect this to statements about the Quran, statements about terrorism, statements about medieval views on women. But at the heart of it all, and this connects back to stories that were thrown against the Jews in the 19th century and early 20th century, is this idea that they are a risk to our, in inverted commas, white women. And what's happening is you can see Musk accelerating the drag to the far right. So suddenly Farage, partly because Farage won't support Tommy Robinson and Farage doesn't support the idea of remigration, is now seen as too soft. So you'll suddenly now see an eruption in Farage's Twitter feed of people further to the right saying, I've had enough now, I'm leaving reform. How dare you betray Tommy Robinson? You've sold out to the globalist liberal elite. And then there are people from the Conservative Party trying to outflank Farage by sounding more like Tommy Robinson. And the big example of this is now Robert Jenrick.
And we're going to come back to Robert Jenrick in a while, and we'll listen to him because this is fascinating. So the reaction to what Musk and others on social media are saying, the really vitriolic rhetoric that we're hearing, is being championed and I guess weaponized by the political establishment who are in opposition in the UK, rather than, and Keir Starmer in his speech yesterday that I played to you, rather than, as Keir Starmer criticised, he said, look, 10 years ago, you guys, all opposition and ruling party would have come out against such incredible invective from a foreign actor like Elon Musk. Yet now you are allowing him to say things about that are really dangerous about our politicians, and you're actually championing what he's saying. And this is not acceptable in our political public discourse. And Robert Jenrick is a prime example as he went for leader of the Conservative Party and lost out just to Kemi Badenoch, that we're going to hear from as well a little bit later. We'll return to him in a second. Right. Okay. So then Elon Musk has continued this rhetoric, calling Starmer evil, just outright saying that complicit in rape, all the things I said to you yesterday. Jess Phillips as well, and really Gordon Brown. These people should be put in prison. The King should dissolve Parliament. All of this stuff that's been, I think, pretty dangerous and actually completely unwelcome, very divisive. Now, the Lib Dem leader, so one of the opposition parties that's not so anti-Labour as, say, the Conservatives, has come out. So Lib Dem leader Ed Davies says the US ambassador should be summoned to ask why an incoming US official, Elon Musk, is suggesting the UK government should be overthrown. So Ed Davies said, people have had enough of Elon Musk interfering with our country's democracy when he clearly knows nothing about Britain. It's time to summon the US ambassador to ask why an incoming US official is suggesting the UK government should be overthrown. And actually, there's something very interesting to add to that as well. I'm going to bring this into play. So David Yellen says 2 of Elon Musk's posts today alone show he clearly has a British advisor. How else would he know who Lawrence Fox is? And use language like, please call your member of parliament. There is either an individual or small team working on this. I bet we find out, and I bet we know them. And yeah, I've been wondering about this actually, because he seems to know enough about things without really knowing about them to just like throw these hand grenades in. But I'm fairly sure he is getting these pointers from someone else, a bit like I've said regarding Donald Trump, that he's saying things. I don't think he's knowledgeable enough about things. He just has a general kind of intuitive view on stuff, and then people provide him with the ammunition to then go out and make some of these idiotic claims. Now, here we have Elon Musk replying to Ed Davies. So this is Ed Davies, one of the political leaders in the UK. And Peter Jukes here says, just goes to show that money can distort character, and the super rich live in their own gated communities of ignorance. Musk's understanding of the world seems to be the inverse proportion to his wealth. So Ed Davies said, something needs to be done about this person interfering in our politics. Elon Musk then replies to Ed Davies and says, what exactly do I fail to understand about your failure to stop the mass rape of little girls in Britain, you snivelling cretin? I mean, Elon Musk should be called into the ambassadors or into the White House and given an absolute talking to. This is unacceptable with nations that are supposed to hold a special relationship. And as I've mentioned previously, why is it that Elon Musk doesn't talk about stolen Ukrainian children put up for adoption on websites funded by Putin? Why does he not say anything about the thousands and thousands of people kidnapped by the Russian administration and sent for brainwashing into Russia? Why is it there are only certain children he's worried about and not others? What is it about Russia that he's afraid of criticizing? So Michael McFaul, the former ambassador to Russia, says, why did Trump, Musk, and other MAGA team and the MAGA team ridicule, offend, and berate our allies, but never say anything critical about our adversaries? It's strange. And this is something I keep saying and I will return to, and it's absolutely pertinent. Now, Times Radio here mentions, or not Times Radio particularly, but we have Elon Musk's father, Errol Musk, talking about his son and talking about Tommy Robinson. So Tommy Robinson is a very, very divisive character in the UK. He's presently in prison for contempt of court that he pleaded guilty to. So he's broken the law a number of times. And yet Errol Musk is, well, I'll let him speak for himself.
The history which I am, then a student.
If you are a student of history, as I am, he says patronizingly.
If you're a student of history, which I am, then a student of history will tell you that there's a very good chance that Tommy Robinson will one day be the Prime Minister of England.
Wow.
Tommy Robinson will never be. There isn't a very good chance he'll be the Prime Minister of England. Errol Musk is an absolute tool. If you're a student of history, as I am, then you will know. No, shut up.
Yes, very good chance.
Very good chance.
Well, if you're a student of history, if you're not a student of history, then I can't help you.
Okay, well, why don't you educate us then? Why does history tell us one day that Tommy Robinson will be the leader
number of people who became head of their country, leaders of their country, who were initially imprisoned by the authorities that ruled at the time. And, so we can start with this country. Nelson Mandela, in 1963, was sentenced to death for bombings, particularly one bombing where they...
And so on and so forth. I mean, I don't need to play you much more of this. He's comparing Tommy Robinson, a far-right activist, with Nelson Mandela. Okay, and this seems to me absolutely insane. But his son, Elon Musk, has been advocating for Tommy Robinson, has even ridiculed Nigel Farage for distancing himself from Tommy Robinson and saying that Farage is not fit to be the ruler of, or the leader of Reform UK anymore. And do you know what? I am going to play this to you in its full, because I think, goodness me, there's several times recently where Piers Morgan has absolutely nailed it. And this is a rarity because 90% of what Piers Morgan says makes you want to punch him in the face. I'm not that violent. Here, Jordan, what is staggering, and we don't actually hear the full amount of what Jordan Peterson says, but the idea here is that Jordan Peterson is advocating for Tommy Robinson in exactly the same way as Elon Musk, and he gets all his information from, by his own admission, Tommy Robinson. And Piers Morgan puts him straight. This is very good.
My problem with Robinson being the so-called hero of this is that many people in America, and I'm not saying you're one of them, I'm sure you now know a lot more about him perhaps than you did before, but Robinson is not in prison right now, but anything to do with the gang rape scandal. He's in prison because of this movie he made, this documentary, as he put it, as a journalist, which I don't think he is. He's someone who made a film after he was convicted in a court by a judge of being seriously defamatory to a young Syrian refugee boy who he tried to make out was the villain of a bullying incident that went viral because there was a clip, when in fact he was the victim. The judge made it crystal clear in his very extensive ruling, which I read at length last night. It's many, many pages. It's extremely detailed. It includes his analysis of all the witness statements, what the school have told him, all the documentary evidence, everything. There's no doubt that the judge's conclusion is that the victim was the victim, that the boy who did the bullying in the video that went viral, Bailey, who was befriended by Tommy Robinson, that he was also a victim in many ways of the firestorm that erupted after this story went viral. He also made it clear that Bailey had not had a racial motivation that he could establish against a Syrian refugee, which had been the original narrative that went out there. So it was very educational, this judgment, in many ways. He getting to the bottom of what had happened. But he also made clear that the 5 witnesses which Robinson brought to court to try and support his proposition that this Syrian refugee was the bad one of the two, that all of their evidence was lacking in credibility. In fact, he called it, he said some of them had clearly invented their testimony completely. And he was very scathing about the quality of the evidence of everyone that Robinson brought there. And in the end, he found Robinson guilty of defamation. He fined him £100,000 and I think £700,000 in legal costs. And he made it crystal clear to him, do not repeat these lies about this Syrian refugee boy, Jamal, again. And all that Robinson did was go away and repeat them to absolutely everyone, including in this film, to wide audiences. And they are ultimately lies, as proven in a very forensic and extensive court case held by a very eminent judge.
So he lost this court case, was told not to defame this guy, then went out and made this scare quotes documentary called Silenced, where he broke the law, did exactly what the judge told him not to do, and then was found in contempt of court, and then so on and so forth. But that documentary site, or quasi documentary, that propagandistic piece, Silenced, is what basically Jordan Peterson is judging Tommy Robinson on.
So my problem with Robinson is that he's trying to portray himself as this great martyr who's been, had lawfare put against him by the British establishment to silence him, when in fact it was his refusal to be silenced and to repeat lies about this young Syrian refugee boy, which is why he's in prison. Secondly, my problem with him, Jordan, if I'm honest, is I don't know how many Americans or people in America who've been following this, because I see all the stuff on social media, they just don't seem to understand that Robinson's criminal record is highly extensive and very unpleasant. So, for 20 years, he's been breaking the law. He attacked an off-duty police officer. He led a hooligan group of football thugs in a brawl involving 100 people. He headbutted a man in Blackburn. He used a false passport to get round the fact he had criminal convictions in the UK to get into America and was caught. He perpetrated mortgage fraud, over £160,000. He was then found in contempt of court twice for turning up at court cases involving people who had been accused of committing these heinous crimes of grooming and raping these girls, nearly wrecking the trials because he was saying defamatory things in public outside the courtroom. And then we come to the refugee story, in which he's now back in prison again. And he was found guilty of stalking a journalist and accusing her partner of being a paedophile. This is not a nice guy. This is a pretty repellent human being who also simultaneously has been right to bang on for many years about the scandal of the rape gangs. So, yes, he's complicated, but at the heart of it is somebody who I think also, just finally on the point of Robinson, 2 points I'd make. One, I think he's done this, he's monetized his hatred of Islam. It has warped, in my view, all his so-called journalism, activism, whatever he wants to call it, because it's always skewed against Muslims. It's never fair and balanced in any way. And I think that's what tipped him over the edge with this story of this boy at the school. And, on that, the bully, the alleged bully, was actually kicked out of the school before this ever got made public by the media. So they'd already had their own investigation, concluded he was guilty not just of that, but a litany of other similar offences. So he was thrown out. So that's where I sit with Robinson.
Yeah, well, I've been following the rape gang scandal for, I would say, 15 years, but the primary source of information for me in Canada has been Tommy Robinson, and his insistence on pursuing this, come what may, was part of the reason that I looked into it, and I think that's probably the case for Elon Musk as well.
And there you go. Well, I mean, we don't hear the rest of it, but the main reason of playing you that is it gives you a sense of who Tommy Robinson is and who Elon Musk is advocating for, and who Jordan Peterson here is supporting. And then Jordan Peterson says, yeah, well, I've got most of my information on all this from Tommy Robinson. Yeah, the very guy that Piers Morgan has just absolutely eviscerated. So, as Dale Vince here says, I like Dale Vince, Tommy Robinson, best mates with Andrew Tate, accused of sex with a minor. That's Andrew Tate. Accepts money from Tristan Tate, his brother, accused of trafficking minors. Best mate of Richard Price, convicted of making indecent images of children. And 10 members of Tommy Robinson's English Defence League have been convicted of CSE, so safeguarding CSE offences. So on and so forth. And it's like, if you are championing Tommy Robinson as this guy that's standing up for these white children, or for children who just so happen to be white, right? Then why is Tommy Robinson mates with all of these people who have been found to or suspected of doing all of these things with minors? It's just like absolute double standards and complete opportunism. Now, it's interesting as well, by the way, Andrew Tate, Less than 24 hours after announcing he was aiming to be the Prime Minister of the UK to get justice for the Pakistani grooming gang victims. So this is Andrew Tate. He said he's going to start this political party called BRUV. Under what was it, the British? Anyway, that's a political party he's starting. Andrew Tate is threatening to sue a victim of the Pakistani grooming gangs because she was mean to him. Amazing. And then, you can just go and see this for yourself. You go read it. But Andrew Tate, anyway, he's the sort of guy that's hanging out with Tommy Robinson. Those two get on, etc., etc. I've already talked to you about statistics, just to remind you that while there might be, the whole thing is about what causes these crimes, and how much is down to either the melanin in their skin or the cultural milieu from which these gangs come. And then how much is to do with culture, how much is to do with socioeconomic standing, how much is to do with low aspiration, immigrant people coming into the country and having either different education levels or being forced to work maybe in jobs that are nighttime jobs and therefore are more skewed towards doing things that involve the seedy elements of night, and etc., etc. And I've talked about all of this in a previous video, right? So you can go and check my previous video on this topic. But as Politics for You state, white British people make up 83% of the population, but represent 88% of perpetrators of child sexual abuse. So across the country, white people are actually overrepresented. We're not talking about gang sexual abuse, but child sexual abuse, full stop. Pakistanis, 2% of the population, are 2% of the offenders overall. So it's different in the gang situation, possibly. But the point is, if you're going to say, well, it's because they're Pakistanis and because they're from this culture or this skin color that they are doing these gang rape things, and you're saying that ethnicity is causally determinative there, then, like I said in my other video, then you have to say that it's because these guys are white, actually, that there's this overrepresentation of white criminals in this particular domain. So yeah, but of course you won't say that, so this is double standards, right? Data is where Rupert Lowe, so he's leader of he's a politician for Reform UK. You're just not interested in what it says. So Rupert Lowe says, we urgently need data on rape gangs, and we do. We actually absolutely do. How many rapists, how many rapes, where did they come from, on what grounds were they, in what country, blah, blah, blah. And here's some data, but you don't seem to be interested in it when, white people are implicated, only when brown people are implicated. Okay, interesting. Now, Jess Phillips has been a victim of Elon Musk's wrath, called her a great genocide apologist, whatever that means, and then has called her an evil witch or something, or twisted witch, I don't know, something like that, as if, he's talking about, he's just involving misogyny in there, and I don't know, incredible. Anyway, interesting that there's a letter that's been written, 3 people who are victims of these grooming gangs, 3 victims of the grooming gangs, and 4 other people who had lost people to such gender-based violence, have written a letter saying, we stand by Jess. Telford survivors criticise Musk's attacks on Phillips. And so Musk, who is the richest person in the world, has used his social media platform to share false and unsubstantiated claims about Keir Starmer and his government since Labour came to power. The letter said, we write as victims of extreme male violence. What connects us all beyond our shared trauma is the support and kindness we have received from Jess Phillips over many years, personally and as activists fighting for change. We know that those who would weaponize our pain for their own ends or political gain, we speak out with newfound interest, not to tackle the horrendous crimes that stole so much from us, but to further their own agenda. They should hang their heads in shame. As campaigners and activists, we fight every day to stop what happens to us or our loved ones happening to anyone else. We stand by Jess, knowing she has devoted her life to fighting for women and girls, so on and so forth. So, it's really interesting that Elon Musk appears to be massively opportunistic, and actually someone who has been fighting for the rights of women and for safeguarding of women. He attacks her because she didn't instigate a national inquiry, but actually neither did the Conservative government previously. They said, we've had this big inquiry, a 7-year inquiry, and a number of other ones, localised inquiries. We don't need another inquiry, we just need to implement what has been recommended. And there are 20 points from the 2022 Professor J inquiry that need to be put in place. So Jess Phillips was like, it's not that I'm not supporting these people. It's not that I'm not recognising there's a problem. It's just that we've already done the inquiry and now we need to get on and do some action. So Musk comes along and then attacks her, jumps on this bandwagon because apparently, you know, she's turned down doing an inquiry as if she's like pro gang rape. It's just absolutely insane. And then Rupert Lowe says Reform is committed to holding a full inquiry into the grape gang scandal if the Labour government fails to do so. We will do, but you don't need another inquiry, you Egypt. Anyway, he continues, we will do everything in our power. Pay attention to this. We will do everything in our power to fight for swift and brutal justice for those responsible. So does everything in your power include Rupert Lowe and Nigel Farage of Reform not going to the debate in Parliament yesterday on that subject? So they're debating the scandal and those two people didn't even bother fricking turning up. We will do everything in our power. This is pure political opportunism. They didn't go to the fishing one either. It's all Twitter show and you gullible idiots lap it up, says that source. And in fact, Nigel Farage is seen here sitting with a Reform UK MP James McMurdoch in the House of Commons. Interesting, who is James McMurdoch? Well, there's been a bit of a scandal with him recently because he was jailed for attacking his girlfriend and says Labour are failing to stop attacks on young women. Methinks there's some hypocrisy here. Anyway, I'm now going to go back to Robert Jenrick, as I promised. And just to let you know what he has said, here is Rory Stewart again.
Jenrick, who we talked about.
Remember, Rory Stewart is a former Conservative MP, went for leader of the Conservative Party, I think, and also went for Mayor of London. But he was kind of too moderate and too nice to get the job.
Was the leadership candidate defeated by Kemi Badenoch to become the leader of the Conservative Party. A man who started right in the David Cameron centre of the party and has been on what could politely be called a journey, and is now putting out tweets saying, on the basis of what happened 10, 15, 20 years ago in Rotherham and Rochdale, that this shows that immigration to Britain was a mistake. And he says hundreds of thousands of people were brought in a disastrous experiment with medieval attitudes from an alien culture, and we need to start sending foreign national offenders back. So this is basically a story that is getting very, very close now to the rhetoric of the AFD and Kekol, but it's coming from my own party. Literally, I'm afraid since Enoch Powell, we haven't had leading Conservative MPs trying to start on this kind of language.
Well, this was the other thing that on the politics, the UK politics of this, that Keir Starmer did yesterday.
And then go on to discuss that at more length. But actually, we're going to go. So Robert Jenrick. So the point I'm trying to make here is that these people, Elon Musk and the politicians in the UK who have jumped on this bandwagon, don't really give a damn about this. Why do we know they don't give a damn about this? Well, let's listen to Robert Jenrick, who's just released that massive tweet that you saw there. Rory Stewart only gave a little bit of a taster of it, but it was full of a really, really powerful anti-immigrant rhetoric and anti-Labour, saying you're jumping on this whole grooming gang scandal bandwagon. As if like he is the champion for these women, but he's not. And we know that because, just hear this. This is Nick Robinson, the former BBC political editor, absolutely doing Jenrick over. This is a delightful bit of journalism.
We know that this was happening in towns and cities the length and breadth of our country.
Says Jenrick.
Did you raise it when you were a Home Office minister?
Look, I wrote about this last year.
Did you raise it when you were a Home Office Minister?
Well, when I was Home Office Minister with Suella Braverman, we did take forward.
Did you raise it when you were a Home Office Minister, Mr. Jenrick?
Well, I did discuss this with the Home Secretary, but it wasn't my portfolio. I did discuss it.
Did you raise it in the House of Commons? Yes, I've checked Hansard today, and it's not a.
By the way, Hansard is a transcript of all things that are said in the House of Commons. So anything that's said in the House of Commons, you can search what has been talked about for the last ever, right? So if he says that I've raised this, I debated this in the House of Commons, I was fervently in support of this, then you can go and check it up and see where Robert Jenrick has everything that Robert Jenrick has ever said in the House of Commons. And it turns out he said, what's the term? Square root of naff all. He said nothing about it. And this is Nick Robinson absolutely doesn't.
Portfolio. I did discuss it.
Did you raise it in the House of Commons? Yes, I've checked Hansard today, and it's not a perfect test. When you put in the name Robert Jenrick, grooming, no mention. Grooming gang,
I wrote about
no
this,
mention.
Nick, I wrote
Rotherham,
about this last year.
No mention. Oldham,
I wrote
no
about
mention.
this, Nick, last year,
Rochdale,
and
no
was
mention.
criticised by the
Child
media
sexual
for doing
abuse,
so.
no mention, Mr. Jenrick. Child rape, no mention. You have not raised, or have you? Please correct me if my search is wrong. The issue of mass gang rape and child sex abuse that you're so energised about, you have no evidence you raised it as a minister and no evidence that you've raised it in the House of Commons.
Absolutely did him.
We know that this was happening.
And do you know what?
In towns
Nick
and
Robinson
cities,
wasn't the only
of our country.
one.
Did you raise it when you were a Home?
It's playing that again. So Nick Robinson wasn't the only journalist that did this. Sky News did this to him as well, and it's equally as delightful.
Should you, when you were in the Home Office, have called loud and clear for a full national statutory?
Remember, the Conservatives were in charge for 14 years, during which all of this happened, right? So they're now saying, Labour have been in charge for 6 months, and they're saying, this hasn't taken place, this hasn't taken place, this hasn't happened. And it's like, hang on, you were here for 14 years. Like, if this hasn't taken place, that's not our fault, that's your fault.
Inquiry when you were in the Home Office.
Well, I think things
Why not?
Because I think things have developed significantly
Because of
since
Elon
then.
Musk?
No, there's nothing to do with Elon Musk. I mean, honestly, I think that you need to get a grip.
On Elon Musk in particular. Do you think he gets Britain?
Why are you asking about Elon Musk?
He's the richest
Why
man in the world.
Why are you not asking about the young girls who are victims
We've just
of this
spent
scandal?
8 minutes on that.
Well, I'm not interested in Elon Musk. I'm interested
but
in
I
trying...
get to decide some of the topics that we talk about.
I don't think your viewers are interested in the tweets of Elon Musk.
I'm going to stand by that. Do you think he gets Britain?
I don't know. I believe in freedom of speech. I think that it's perfectly acceptable for anyone in this country or indeed around the world to be able to go onto a social media platform and make their views known within the confines of the law.
Just absolutely done again, because he hasn't actually got any history of giving a damn about this in previous times. So in fact, this is a slightly different clip of the same interview that is equally illuminating.
Alexis Jay's inquiry took 7 years. It cost £200 million and made 20 recommendations in 2022 when you were in government. Why didn't your government immediately implement all 20 recommendations?
Well, we did begin to do that.
But Alexis Jay said your government was weak in implementing some of these recommendations. At the same time, you're saying that this inquiry wasn't sufficient. Your government, your party's government, was the one that set the terms of it and commissioned it £200 million ago, 7 years into the reporting. And again, I ask you the extent to which you point the torchlight on yourselves. If you're waving and screaming about not enough being done by the current government, they've had 6 months in power. They've had 1 week of the light being shone on this by Elon Musk. You had 14 years.
Well, I think we all should reflect upon what we did or didn't do.
Alexis Jay's...
You're damn right you should reflect on what you did or didn't do. And shine a light on yourself, as that guy says. So, it absolutely blows my mind that the Conservative politicians are coming out and saying this. And Nadine Dorries, who is a politician that I absolutely do not like, does exactly this. And I'm going to play it to you as well.
I'm a victim of child sex abuse myself, but through the Church of England.
When did you realise you wanted another one?
So probably when the calls first came for one, because I wasn't. Well, I assumed that because I was Secretary of State when the Alex James report was first came out, and I believed that the recommendations were being carried out following that report, and indeed I think there were 500 arrests as a result.
Right.
But what I wasn't aware of was that at the time, because the information was concealed, I wasn't aware that the problem was as widespread as it was. I believed it was in Rotherham and Telford and other towns. I wasn't aware that the inquiry hadn't included Oldham. I wasn't aware that the inquiry had excluded a huge number of witnesses who wanted to make statements, including people like Mikey Oliver, who was the police detective turned whistleblower.
But she gave a lot of evidence to the Greater Manchester-wide review, which was commissioned by Andy Burnham,
but she's also somebody who has a huge amount of experience and knowledge.
She totally
what's taken place, and she should have been the first person to have been on the evidence list for a national inquiry, and she wasn't.
Tomorrow, the Conservatives will force a vote in Parliament.
So can I also say, Victoria, as well,
that
the inquiry was much further reaching than just the grooming gangs. And I think a national inquiry on what happened in terms of the grooming gangs and the people who knew.
So why didn't the Conservatives do that then?
Well, yeah, that's a good question.
Well, you were in the government, so tell us.
I was Culture Secretary. This didn't even come anywhere near my desk.
No, but you were sat around the cabinet table enough, weren't you?
I can assure you that the entire time I was cabinet, this was never discussed.
So I'm asking you why.
So I can't.
Because there are a number of Conservatives who were in government.
Well,
this is why I'm playing this to you. This is freaking delightful in a someone digging their own grave. It's like, so you're coming out and saying all this should be happening, but you knew about this when you were in government and you were in the cabinet, and you're now just told me that we never discussed this at all. But we knew about it, but we never discussed it. So, again, like with Robert Jenrick, what the frick are you doing coming out and shouting about it now and not shouting about it when you were in power? You are admitting to us that you did not do your due diligence here. It's incredible. I absolutely love this interview from Victoria Derbyshire.
The entire time I was cabinet, this was never discussed.
Ouch.
So I'm asking you why.
So I can't.
Because there are a number of Conservatives who were in government who are calling for it now.
I can't answer the question, but I think a good person for you to ask that question to would be people like Suella Braverman and Priti Patel, who were Home Secretaries at the time.
I mean, there's no record of you speaking in the chamber specifically about Oldham, Telford, Rochdale, Rotherham, or ever calling for a national inquiry.
So exactly like Robert Jenrick. So here you are coming on television, slagging off the Labour government who have been in charge for 6 months, and you were in a cabinet position. You were Secretary of State. You were Culture Secretary. You have never. There's no evidence of you ever mentioning this ever. Opportunism.
So when this was taken, I did support with John Mann. I did attend a number of you don't have to stand up in the chamber and speak about something to support something. I attended those meetings in Committee Room 14 and others at the time when it was launched, when Theresa May was Prime Minister.
Tomorrow, the Conservatives will force a vote in Parliament on holding another fresh national inquiry into the child rape gang scandal. That's despite the Conservatives setting up that 7-year-long £200 million independent inquiry on child sexual abuse. Theresa May, the then Home Secretary, set it up. She set the terms of reference. And then the Conservative government didn't implement any of the 20 recommendations. So isn't calling for another one the very definition of political opportunism?
Yes.
So do you know what the sad thing is about this sentence is, as a health minister and as culture secretary, I dealt with a number of reports, and quite frequently you find that these inquiries will take place and none of the recommendations are implemented.
And so the same people who didn't implement those recommendations calling for another one, I'm asking you, isn't that the definition?
You were the ones that didn't implement the recommendations, you Egypt.
Definition of political opportunism.
I think it's a definition of what we need to do to fix how government...
I've got to play that. Yeah, it is political opportunism. You've absolutely done me. This is so delightful.
Another one. I'm asking you, isn't that the definition of political opportunism?
I think it's a definition of what we need to do to fix how government deals with inquiries and how it deals with recommendations.
To do that.
I think part of the problem is that dealing with recommendations, which are usually made by people outside of Westminster, the people who actually put in place those recommendations are civil servants or arm's length bodies or others.
So it's the civil servants' fault?
You're dealing with, no, I'm not saying it's their fault at all. What I'm saying is that you're dealing with something which is outside of the normal processes and maybe is unable to be delivered by government or the civil services. And I think it's the processes that take place within government and how government and the civil service function, which makes delivering some of those recommendations almost impossible.
Well, they didn't deliver any of the 20.
And then you're having a go at Labour. It's almost impossible to do it unless you're Labour, and we can attack you for that. But if it's the Conservatives, it's almost impossible for us to have implemented any of these recommendations because blah 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 blah, blah political opportunism. Absolutely incredible. And then you've got Elon Musk throwing his oar in. So Kemi Badenoch, who is the Conservative Party leader who fought off Robert Jenrick, who's a guy that you just heard from, she was in Prime Minister's Questions in the House of Commons, that she then brought this up in perfect political opportunism. And Elon Musk shares, here he says brave and true words. Kemi Badenoch outright accuses Keir Starmer of blocking a national inquiry to prevent Labour politicians being implicated, right? So you've got some douchebag here saying, jaws on the floor across the House. As if Kemi Badenoch did a really good job of bringing this up, and Elon Musk goes yes, and actually shares Kemi Badenoch saying that. And by the way, her surname is incredibly pertinent. She is a bad Enoch Powell. But anyway, Kemi Badenoch here, attacks the government for their handling of this, right? And Elon Musk shares that, but doesn't share, very conveniently, Keir Starmer's response, because Keir Starmer takes her to pieces. I mean, you can go and see the whole 15 minutes, 40 seconds here. As someone says, the Conservative Party are politicising child sexual abuse at Prime Minister's Questions. Absolutely disgusting from Kemi Badenoch. So this is Elon Musk saying she's absolutely wonderful. Absolutely disgusting, says someone else. Here's a full 15-minute exchange starting from when she begins to speak. But actually, what we're going to do, because you can pretty much guess what what she said. And this is Keir Starmer, a part of what he said back to her when she's just sitting there taking a bit of a spanking here.
The party have been in government for 7.5 of those 8 years. She was the Children's Minister. She was the Women's and Equalities Minister. I can't recall her once raising this issue in the House, once calling for a national inquiry. It's only in...
Bloody Children's Minister. How dare she stand up and say this?
Recent days, she's jumped on the bandwagon. Now, Mr. Speaker, in fairness, if I'm wrong about that, and she has raised it, then I invite her to say that now, and I will happily withdraw the remark that she hasn't raised it in this House in the 8 years that she's been here until today.
And of course, she couldn't, because she hasn't. This is political opportunism, and this is jumping on Musk's absolute rancid tweeting of what is a really sensitive and horrific issue, right? No one is minimizing the experience that these poor minors had and are still going through. I mean, it is terrible. And the inquiries have been done. Recommendations need to be acted on. Now, it's interesting that when you actually go back and look at recommendation 16, Keir Starmer was singled out for praise in the 2022 report. And as this person says, the far right singularly fail to mention that fact. Recommendation 16. We would also like to commend the work of the Director for Public Prosecutions, Keir Starmer QC, and the Chief Prosecutor for the Northwest, Nazir Afzal, OBE. Mr. Starmer has striven to improve the treatment of victims of sexual assault within the criminal justice system throughout his term as Director of Public Prosecutions, and when he leaves the Crown Prosecution Service this year, he will be missed. His response should provide a model to the other agencies involved in tackling localized grooming, to which Elon Musk says Starmer is evil. Of course, it's absolute bastardization of reality what people like Elon Musk are propagating. Absolutely incredible. And Darth Putin here has a good point. Is when Musk says his stuff and all these people are talking about free speech. There's no free speech in the UK anymore. Darth Putin, very tongue-in-cheek, says, I'd like to thank all the hundreds of my genuine UK serfs who spent hours of, between 3:30 in the morning and 5:30 in the morning UK time, which is 7:30 to 10:30 in the morning Yekaterinburg time, tweeting about how the UK has no free speech because of how tyrannical it is. They will now be arrested because they're in the UK and not Russia, and it's tyrannical. As all these people jump on supporting what Elon Musk says, and of course they are just Russian trolls. Absolutely incredible. Those two are out of position. So what we're going to do now is look at social media in general and say, okay, so this is a scandal that has its issues, but needs to be sorted out, but is being championed by Elon Musk, and he's not being corrected on it. He's not being called out formally enough on his claims, and he appears to be able to say these things, at least at the moment, with impunity. And disinformation is spreading rampantly on, for example, Twitter. So we then hear the extraordinary statements from Mark Zuckerberg. As Aaron Bastani says, this is utterly extraordinary. As Zuckerberg announces changes to Meta censorship policies, community notes are to replace fact checkers, while Zuckerberg lambasts legacy media. By the way, he's wearing a $1 million watch there. You sometimes hear the claim that elections don't matter. Really? So what he's doing is basically stripping out all of the fact checkers. You might have heard this on the news from Twitter, Threads, Instagram, etc., etc. All the fact checkers being ripped out, and then they're going to be replaced by a community notes type thing, which is what Twitter has, and exactly what Trump did. So, Musk did. So why is Zuckerberg copying Musk? It's really interesting and not a little scary. Community notes are not responsive. They take sometimes they're good, and they can work really well. And I've read you a number of community notes. But the damage is already done. It's out there. And then it's spread. And then community notes aren't also put on people who spread that stuff. It's just often put on the initial claim, but often too long after that has been sent out into the virtual world. Now, Lewis Goodall says, on the 4-year anniversary of their kicking Trump off Meta's platform. So remember, Meta and Trump didn't get on. Then Trump criticised Meta and threatened Zuckerberg. And now Zuckerberg is doing this. So on the 4-year anniversary of their kicking Trump off Meta, Zuckerberg is trying to out Musk. Quote, it's time to get back to our roots around free expression, he says. He says Meta will replace fact checkers with community notes, quote, simplify our content policies and remove restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are out of touch with mainstream discourse, remove the vast majority of censorship mistakes, moved our trust and safety and content moderation teams out of California and our US content review to Texas. That's exactly what Elon Musk did, because he thought California was too liberal and wanted to move to Texas. As a kind of two fingers up to Gavin Newsom. And Mark Zuckerberg is copying everything that Musk has done. Quote, work with President Trump to push back against foreign governments going after American companies to censor more. Wow. So in other words, he's inviting in foreign governments to interfere with Meta in the same way that Twitter has essentially invited Russian, North Korean and Iranian and Chinese bot and troll farms to interfere on Twitter. That is what your man is going to do. We're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US, said Zuckerberg. And they're now going to prioritize free speech. Of course, we know that free speech is just a kind of a euphemism for allowing anything and everything, and allowing trolls and bots to have their way. So Mehdi Hassan says, one of the richest men, most powerful people in human history, once ridiculously described as a liberal and a Democrat, just totally enthusiastically, this is Zuckerberg, rolling over for Trump, the Republicans, and right-wing narratives about censorship, immigration, media bias, and more. This is shameful stuff, he says. And Elon Musk then replies, well, this is cool. Facebook dumps, in answer to the headline, Facebook dumps fact-checkers in attempt to restore free speech. Mark Zuckerberg says moderators too politically biased as he pledges a similar system to X. And he's taken on the Dana White from the UFC on his board, right? Who's a guy that was at the Madison Square Gardens Republican convention or Republican rally with Donald Trump, that highly controversial one. He was one of the speakers and he was nuts then. That's who Mark Zuckerberg is taking on. So what is going on? Why is Mark Zuckerberg doing this? He's just given $1 million to Trump's inauguration slush fund. Brian Stelter says Meta is facing an antitrust trial in April. The company has lots of other business before the US government, and Trump once threatened to send Zuckerberg to prison for, quote, the rest of his life. That's just some of the background for today's big Meta announcements. Today's changes almost seem to be directly addressed to Trump, especially since Meta gave the exclusive to Fox and Friends, one of his favourite shows. Joel Kaplan was on the show and fully agreed with Fox's censorship versus freedom framing. It all makes sense. My goodness me. And of course, Trump was questioned about Zuckerberg in the press conference last night, and he was asked, do you think Zuckerberg's changed his mind because of your threats on him? And he said, probably. So connect the dots, says Chris Murphy. Facebook faces a potentially devastating FTC case slated to begin in April. Trump is now in charge of the FTC. Zuckerberg makes a pilgrimage to Mar-a-Lago, then donates $1 million to the Trump inauguration, and now this gift to the MAGA anti-democracy forces and also Putin. Join the dots. Join the dots. Melanie Dorigo says Republicans in Congress have also pushed to ban TikTok and force a sale, which is something I'm not too much in disagreement with, right? There is some interesting analysis on whether actually the TikTok thing is as bad as people... I've seen some analyses that actually say that, look, if you're going to do this to TikTok, you pretty much got to do it to all of the media firms, and it's TikTok is kind of being singled out arguably unfairly. But nonetheless, now a wealthy, politically connected Republican is close to buying it. So this is the man from Shark Tank that you see on TV quite a bit, Kevin O'Leary. This isn't about safety. It's about Republicans forcibly controlling the content 170 million Americans consume. X, Meta, Snap, and now TikTok. The social media platform, says Elliot Higgins from Bellingcat, the open source intelligence network consumed by AI garbage, is copying the ideas of the social media platform that's in the process of being consumed by AI garbage. Social media companies are disposing of all the fig leaves they use to avoid regulation now that they've got an easily manipulated man baby in charge, and also Trump. Ouch. The problem with community notes is it just creates another layer of social media that can be gamed or barraged by communities and individuals with their own biases. Absolutely on point. And a fascinating article here by Owen Jones. And people, you know, if you know British politics, some people don't like Owen Jones. He sits on the left, and that's probably why they don't like him. I've met him, actually. I was on the BBC Big Questions show, and he was on the panel with me. And of all the people there, there's a big old panel. He was the nicest guy. He was absolutely lovely guy. And that's my own experience of Owen Jones. Anyway, to see how Trump will control the US media, look to Viktor Orban's Hungary. We're just going to go through this. I'd said this is going to be a long video. So be it. Will democracy survive a second Trump presidency? A change of senior personnel at the social media company involving a former British deputy prime minister may not seem all too relevant to this heated discussion, but Nick Clegg's decision to leave Meta as head of global affairs and a choice of his successor may point to how Western democracy dies, not with fireworks, but through quiet attrition. Right. Nick Clegg was the deputy prime minister in a coalition. He was in charge. He was the leader of the Lib Dems, and he went into coalition with the Conservatives with David Cameron back when there was a minority government back in 2010. Nick Clegg, when he came out of politics, was hired by Meta, and that was seen as a kind of like quite a not progressive move, but you know, pretty sensible. Nick Clegg, I like Nick Clegg. He's pretty decent human actually, and that role was interesting. And he's sometimes had a difficult role in, you know, when you're talking about the difficulties of social media. It is no coincidence that he's just resigned, as Meta are going to do what Meta are going to do. Absolutely no coincidence. Clegg's job, Jones says, will be taken over by his deputy, Joel Kaplan, a Republican who worked with George Bush's administration. He is someone who, according to a Washington Post report from 2020, pushed to block Meta taking action against dozens of pages that had peddled false news reports before the 2020 election, arguing it would disproportionately affect conservatives. Oh, Paul Kaplan. As a columnist at MSNBC put it, his elevation is another sign that Meta is getting a MAGA-friendly makeover. Meta matters. 33% of Americans say they regularly get their news from Facebook and 20% from Instagram. Trump, meanwhile, has portrayed Mark Zuckerberg as a threat, accusing him of plotting against him in 2020 presidential election and threatening in his recent book, Save America, that he would, quote, spend the rest of his life in prison if he did it again. Now there's been a change of tune. Zuckerberg dined with his would-be jailer at Mar-a-Lago. Trump's spokesperson has since declared the tech mogul, quote, wants to support the national renewal of America under Trump's leadership. What exactly will be the direction of Facebook's content moderation? Clegg had appointed Meta's oversight board charged with moderating content, and one plugged-in market research company suggests Kaplan's appointment signals that Meta may reconsider its content moderation policies, especially those related to political speech. X, formerly known as Twitter, has increasingly become a far-right cesspit under Elon Musk's ownership, though changes to the algorithm, that is, which types of account get boosted the most, through those changes. One study found that the site had a pro-Republican bias before the plutocrat endorsed Trump in July 2024, but that only accelerated afterwards. That bias at the time was a 2-to-1 ratio. You might say that a spectre is haunting US democracy, the spectre of Hungary. There, democracy was not overthrown by tanks in the streets, mass arrests of paramilitary violence. The country's leader, Viktor Orban, once described himself as an agnostic liberal, and his Fidesz party seemingly belonged to the conventional centre-right. But in office, it marched off to the far right, aggressively opposing migrants and LGBTQ+ rights. The Constitutional Court was filled with Orban cheerleaders, electoral boundaries were favourably redrawn, civil servants purged, and laws targeting civil society culminated with the so-called Protection of National Sovereignty Act, threatening fines and imprisonment for anyone judged to be under foreign influence law. What happened to Hungary's media is instructive. Media outlets weren't censored, but the regime placed the state broadcaster under the control of loyalists, with dissidents denouncing it as a propaganda machine. Business people close to Orban simply bought up media organisations, which then ensured their editorial position aligned with the government's. That has now escalated to crackdowns under the new sovereignty law. You could call this process Orbanisation. Let's now look again at the US. One of the two main social media giants, X, has become a Trumpian propaganda machine, and the other is clearly cowed. Trump has begun to sue media organisations, declaring he wants to straighten out the press, and Musk is threatening the same. The result is likely to be the chilling effect combined with the prospect of self-censorship even before the election. The Washington Post and the Los Angeles Times declined to endorse a candidate, a decision that was widely believed to be driven by fear of retribution. What action could be taken against media organisations when Trump allies have the state machinery, well, pretexts for vexatious investigations and prosecutions may follow. What Hungary tells us is that you can hollow out the substance of democracy by other means than violence. Some might object to this comparison, pointing to far weaker democratic traditions in Hungary compared to the US. This is true, but I raise you the fact that Trump, not least his current iteration, is significantly more extreme than Orban. Hungary's autocrat may speak of an illiberal democracy, but Trump has threatened to prosecute or punish perceived opponents more than 100 times since 2022, when he began preparing for the presidential campaign. And more US voters than not did not regard that as disqualifying. His pick for FBI Director Kash Patel has even drawn up what critics call an enemies list. The more extreme Trump enjoys majorities in both houses and Supreme Court. And what will happen if there is a crisis during his presidency, such as a big terrorist attack or turbulent protests? During Black Lives Matter protests after the murder of George Floyd, Trump's desire to send the military was overruled. Will that same happen this time? Perhaps not. Perhaps even a desperately flawed democratic system will keep what several former Trump advisors describe as his fascist sympathies at bay. But the threat of a slow and insidious urbanization is real. Democracy will not suddenly collapse. It may simply silently retreat behind the scenes until it is too late to notice. And I think that is a really well put together, concise article to show we've got a problem here. Now, there's another article here by Maria Ressa, who is a Nobel Peace Prize winner. Meta is ushering in a world without facts, says Nobel Peace Prize winner. And she warns of dangerous times for journalism and democracy. Or I don't know. Anyway, yeah, Maria Ressa. For journalism and democracy after the move to end fact-checking in the US. Okay, so the American-Filipino journalist said Mark Zuckerberg's move to relax content moderation on the Facebook and Instagram platforms would lead to a world without facts, and that was a world a world that's right for a dictator. Mark Zuckerberg says it's a free speech issue. That's completely wrong, Ressa told the AFP news service. Only if you're profit-driven can you claim that. Only if you want power and money can you claim that. This is about safety. Ressa, a co-founder of the Rappler news site, won the Nobel Peace Prize in 2021 in recognition of her courageous fight for freedom of expression. She faced multiple criminal charges and investigations after publishing stories critical of the former Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte. Ressa rejected Zuckerberg's claim that fact-checkers had been, quote, too politically biased and had, quote, destroyed more trust than they've created. Journalists have set a standard have a set of standard and ethics, Ressa said. What Facebook is going to do is get rid of that and then allow lies, anger, fear and hate to infect every single person on the platform, which is what's happened on Twitter. Well, I had one of my mates, Pierre. I was speaking to him today. He's in Ukraine, and he said, "Oh God, I got on Twitter yesterday, and I'm going to have to not get on there again. It was absolutely horrific." And I just got lost in this, he was telling me that it was just a really horrible experience. That's what Twitter has become. So the decision meant, quote, extremely dangerous times ahead for journalism, democracy, and social media users. This is absolutely true. So this is where I'm going with all of this. I'm using the example of this grooming scandal to as a segue into the broader discussion about how in America, and therefore really the world, the social media landscape is being slowly squeezed, and there is this attrition of voices that would stand up for facts and truth and democracy, and it's being squeezed by those who are far more illiberal. And here we've got, I've mentioned Stephen Knight before as someone who is politically well on the right. Stephen Knight, he's interviewed me before, like many years ago when I was on that BBC programme actually, and we were talking about free will, and fascinating discussion. But since then I've seen him go like really, really to the right. Anyway, what he said about Tommy Robinson and Elon Musk has actually been on point this last week. So Stephen Knight says Elon Musk has a habit of spreading unverified and often false information on very serious topics to millions of people. He wants you to believe his is this true shtick. So what he's talking about here is the Elon Musk's, he posts something that is clearly disinformation, and he goes, is this accurate? And of course, the time it takes for fact checkers to come in and then write, not official fact checkers, but just randos, to come in and write community notes and correct it, that has already let the genie out the bottle. And that disinformation then spreads. People share, and then a week later it's got community notes on it, or a few days later, or whatever. And this is what Stephen Knight's picking up on, and of course this is where Meta's going. He wants you to believe his "is this true" shtick demonstrates a commitment to truth and due diligence, but it's a sham. Someone dedicated to truth and reason would verify incredibly serious claims before spreading them to millions of people. Read up on a subject before you spread disinformation. Furthermore, this way of operating does not take the primacy effect into account. This is a really important point, whereby people are likely to remember the first piece of information they encounter better than any later information that debunks it. There's a saying that predates social media by hundreds of years, but it may as well have been coined in tribute to it. A lie can travel halfway around the world while the truth is still putting on its shoes. And the sort of spreading that he does, is this true? But he doesn't actually do it to... I've talked to you about Mario Norfal, one of these horrible sources that Elon Musk keeps using and referring to and reposting. Shashank Joshi is quoting here from the Financial Times, quote, "In the past week, Musk has reposted Norfal almost 40 times. The billionaire has posted or reposted 616 times on X during the same period, at least 225 of which were about UK politics. Including replies, he has posted more than 1,180 times in 7 days. 40 of which, like just in the past week, 40 times he's reposted Norfal. And Norfal is egregious, is disinformative, is a horrific source, in my opinion. That is the ecosystem that Musk lives in. Now, I wrote this on Facebook the other day. The world is going nuts. Why the hell did we have to have Trump winning and implicitly advocating Musk's existence? Why do we have a bunch of dictator wannabes who are looking at what Russia has done and what China wants to do and then said, we can do that, Panama, Greenland, Canada? Then the rampant disinformation on Tommy Robinson, grooming scandals, libel against politicians, and a political war against their strongest ally, the UK. Now, Zuckerberg has removed fact-checking and added Dana White to the Meta board, getting rid of moderators and copying Musk, queuing right on top of Zuckerberg donating $1 million to Trump's inauguration. Jeff Bezos is paying Melania Trump $40 million, we'll come to this in a second, for a documentary on Amazon, a way of Amazon giving Trump money on top of Bezos donating $1 million to Trump's inauguration. And Bezos also owns the Washington Post. And remember, the Washington Post, their cartoonist has just resigned because they weren't allowed to do a cartoon that showed Bezos genuflecting to Trump. And they also refused to endorse a candidate or Kamala Harris in the election. Anyway, Kevin O'Leary, a Republican, is trying to buy TikTok. ABC paid $15 million to settle a frivolous lawsuit that was a gimme to win. They chose to pay Trump instead of easily winning. So that was a court case that was about whether... So George Stephanopoulos had said that Trump raped E. Jean Carroll, reading from his notes. And then Trump kind of went to court to sue him. But the judge in that case had clearly said in the notes on the case afterwards that it was rape. Although, like, the rules in that particular... Because it was digital insertion... Sorry to be so graphic here, it was seen as sexual abuse, but it was functionally rape and would otherwise be known as rape. So that court case, ABC would have won. So what's really interesting there is ABC decided not to win the court case, but to pay Trump out of court settlement of $15 million. Why would they do that? To appease Trump. Abeyance. When you obey up front, then that is that was chapter 1 in Timothy Snyder's book on tyranny. If you're obeying a dictator, if you like, up front, You are welcoming in tyranny. And that's what ABC did. It chose not to win the court case, but to pay Trump $15 million. Then, OpenAI owner is donating $1 million to Trump's inauguration. So all of these media outlets, and obviously Fox News, Tim Cook, who's the CEO of Apple, Apple News, Apple TV, is donating $1 million to Trump's inauguration. Elon Musk bought Twitter and turned it into a right-wing propaganda machine. The MAGA media takeover is in full swing, and they are genuflecting to their dear leader. At least 11 corporations have now come out. I think Ford is one of them, a few big corporations, who said that they weren't going to get involved in supporting, in funding inaugurations after January the 6th, because that was so egregious. They've now come out. So 11 corporations that denounced the January 6th insurrection or paused political donations are now lining up to fund Trump's inauguration. The world has lost the plot. He's now got $200 million for his inauguration oftentimes from people that said January the 6th was so horrific that we're not going to do anything like this again. And then a couple of years later, they're like, oh yeah, we better pay Trump because dictator. Let's look at this Melania Trump, $40 million Jeff Bezos' Amazon is paying Melania Trump for a documentary. Phillips O'Brien says, here is how it starts. So, MAGA has built a castle of lies, but is grounded in two truths. Unless the truths are dealt with, the damage may be irreversible, is a piece that Phillips O'Brien has written. And he says, this is how it starts. So this is Phillips O'Brien writing in his article. Did you know that Melania Trump was the greatest documentary filmmaker in history? It's true. Forget Ken Burns, Alex Gibney, or Werner Herzog. They're not in Melania's league. You want proof? Well, Amazon has just paid a staggering $40 million just to have the ability to broadcast the documentary about her life that she will produce. That $40 million doesn't even allow them to own the documentary outright. That would obviously be cripplingly expensive considering her cinematic and production brilliance. No, that just gets them the ability to show it to all of their Prime subscribers, who I'm sure won't be able to rest until it is broadcast. In other words, rather like ABC finding a way to give Trump $15 million, this looks very much like a way that Amazon can fund Trump, can pay Trump $40 million without overtly paying Trump $40 million. This is not only corruption, this is quid pro quo, this is the media, this is Amazon Prime paying dictator wannabe $40 million, as well as Jeff Bezos giving him $1 million separately for inauguration, and Jeff Bezos not allowing his newspaper, the Washington Post, to endorse the opponent to Trump, and then the cartoonist resigning because they can't do what they want. This is a media takeover. Unbelievable. Now, what we need to do is what Australia did. Australia has introduced a new bill that will limit the total spending on a party by billionaires like Elon Musk to just $20,000. So this is in light of Elon Musk's possibly giving Reform UK or Nigel Farage $100 million. This will ban billionaires from single-handedly buying elections in Australia. They are also bringing out lots of social media laws as well. Australia appear to be the only country that are willing to really do something about this. Or maybe not. We shall see. Because the French Foreign Minister has called on the European Commission to, quote, with maximum firmness, protect EU countries from interference in their policies, in particular by Elon Musk. Either the European Commission firmly applies laws to protect public space, or EU member states will do so. And then Shashant Joshi is reporting from the Financial Times again. The international far right, which we have been denouncing for years, is led by the richest man on the planet and is openly attacking our institutions, said the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez in a speech to mark 50 years since the death of Franco, the dictator. There could be some fight back from Europe here, and I hope to see that. Derek Tanis, here's a Romanian source, says Spain and France have now joined Britain and Germany in asking that the European Commission to open an investigation into Elon Musk under EU's DSA, openly and rightfully, might I add, accusing him of spreading misinformation and interfering in European politics. We'll have to wait and see how this turns out. Hopefully this this video. If you stuck with me for 1 hour and 18 minutes, then thank you for putting up with all of this. But I was hopefully illustrating how Elon Musk can use one particular topic to attack a government, to try and undermine the political processes in a democratic nation, to try and control the government and to try and manipulate people through, I think, disinformation, through his own megaphone, to try and upset and interfere with elections there. Then I've gone on to show you that it's not just Trump, that we're seeing Meta do stuff, we're seeing all of this interference across the media landscape, and we are seeing all these big corporations and media entities genuflect, as I've said, to Trump in this kind of, to acquiesce to his leadership so that there will be no accountability to him. They are in his pocket. He owns them. They have paid him. They're all right now, thank you very much. But they won't be critical of him. You can bet your bottom dollar. All of what Meta and Twitter and you can guess many of these other entities, all they will do will be to the benefit of Trump and Musk. And the narrative from the White House for the next 4 years. This is a scary time we live in, not just geopolitically in terms of Russia and this new age of empires and China and this axis of evil. Not only in terms of the information war being perpetuated by the axis of evil, North Korea, Iran, China and Russia, troll farms, bot farms, fighting in the information spaces. We don't know what's true and we've struggled to differentiate between fact and fiction. But the information spaces are not only being attacked from the outside, they're being manipulated from the inside. They're being sold off to the highest bidder. They are being given as gifts almost to the new king. The new king comes along, I've got a gift for you. It's not gold, it's not frankincense, it's not myrrh. It is my social media platform. There you go, oh great leader. I hope this is what you would like. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like. Oh, here's $1 million as well. Oh, here's $40 million. Here's $15 million. Hopefully, if you are a fan of free and fair democratic ideals, even if you're a Republican, because you know that this is a sort, I'm maybe some liberal lefty that's having a go at this because I don't like Trump. No, I like democracy and I like fairness. I'm really driven by fairness. Fairness is something that floats my boat. This is unfair. This is all really unfair. And hopefully, even if you are a Republican, you can notice that this is not, like, if this was happening on the other side, if George Soros was doing all of this and had been doing, and everyone else, not just him, all of these other entities were doing this to the effect that these people are doing this, you would be hopping mad. So get your pogo stick and hop along with me, because I am hopping mad. And I just hope that there's enough in the political toolbox of the EU, that there's enough resilience in the EU, in Europe, in the UK, in Australia, to be able to stand up to what I think are people who are driving us towards a destination of autocracy and a lack of freedom. Anyway, that's enough from me. Thank you for watching. If you have, take care. Speak to you soon.